hold these children as whole and perfect and lovable just the way they are.
Yes,
and so that's
wonderful.
Really, also in conscious recovery, this is all about returning to that. So that's, you asked what's fundamentally different. That really is what's different, is we're looking at how we return to that rather than how we move toward something.
So what do you do as a practical matter when you're helping people to get past their addictions? Is it unique to each person, or is there a process you go through?
Well, it is unique to each person in some ways. The second section of my book is Breaking the Cycle of Addiction, and it starts, the first chapter in that section, I talk about creating safety. Internal and external safety is, to me, the most important first step, because we can't really begin to do this deeper work of unlearning, which is the next chapter, unlearning. What are the stories, the beliefs, the ideas? As we said, the cultural downloads, what has happened to us, how have we developed this sense of a broken self? What needs to be unlearned? I start with creating safety because that is, to me, the most important step. How do we move into some self-love, move away from self-criticism into self-acceptance, building safe community, a place where we can begin to unlearn all of these damaging belief systems that the world has taught us?
Yeah, that is so important, because that's what you needed when you were 7. That's what you needed, a safe place. You needed to have someone validate who you knew you were, which is a whole and healthy and wonderful person. When you didn't get that, then all of this went wrong. And I'm sure your name is Legion. I'm sure it happens to so many people when they encounter the imperfect world that causes them to develop these problems. So you teach them that. Do you do this in groups or individually?
It's both groups and individually. Actually, Conscious Recovery 2 now has a workbook. So we've actually created, each chapter has 5 interactive processes and 20 journaling questions where someone can go through this entire process. And it's interesting that you talked about that, what a child really needs, and that's love and connection and that safety, because in the chapter on unlearning, I move into looking at how we can begin to parent ourselves, right? Self-parenting is a practice that really changed my life because I recognized that what my child needed was validation. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to be afraid. I'm here for you. So I have an entire process around self-parenting about how we can begin to recognize there's still that place within us that feels like that wounded child, and she or he is still in there needing that love and attention, and it's ours to do for ourselves now. So that's an important part of that unlearning process.
So do people then begin to feel naturally less drawn to needing whatever they were addicted to, or is that a separate process of will? How does a transition happen? I know that's the third part of your book, right?
Well, this is where I want to be careful how I talk about it, because I do recognize that people do become physically addicted at some point. People do help with withdrawal. There are chemical hooks in certain drugs. What we're talking about today, though, is these deeper spiritual root issues. So the short answer to your question is yes. When we begin to do this healing, we can begin to return to this place of spiritual wholeness, and we're no longer needing or wanting something outside of ourselves. A huge part of my work is really helping someone to simply be able to sit and be with themselves. That to me is maybe perhaps a little overly simplified, but it's really where we meet that place where we just can't stand to be with ourselves. That place where we want to not feel, to not experience this, not have these thoughts, and we want to try to interrupt that with something or someone. So mindfulness and being able to simply be with where we're at in this moment is a huge part of recovery.
Wow. We're talking now about his book, which is called Conscious Recovery. And I think this is something we have needed all along, because no matter how many times you get treated for an addiction, if they're not addressing what is the cause of that addiction, I mean, yes, you could be physically addicted, as TJ pointed out, to something, but why did you? I mean, I've never even attempted or thought of attempting to take any kind of drug like that. Why? Because I don't feel the need of it. So that's what he is doing, really, is helping people get past the need for that drug or that alcohol so they can heal and stay healed. So talk about that. Please, TJ, talk about a return to wholeness, which is the third part of your book.
Yes, after we've done this deep dive into these spiritual root causes, and then we've looked at how we break the cycle of addiction, conscious recovery then moves into the third part, which is a return to wholeness. And in the beginning of that section, there's a whole conversation about power, because in a lot of recovery circles, there's a big conversation around powerless. You just need to be powerless and turn it over to something or someone and you'll be okay. And I think that can be useful at one stage. And yet there's something much deeper here. I find that most people who are coming out of an addiction actually have given away their power. So the 7th chapter, which is the beginning of this conversation, A Return to Wholeness, is called Owning Your Power. And I look at these different ways we can reclaim our power. The power of perception, the power of forgiveness, how we deepen that forgiveness and become accountable for our own lives. We begin to become more compassionate in the world. And as we talked about in the last section, we can begin to learn how to be present with ourselves, actually feel all of those emotions we've been running from for weeks, months, years, sometimes decades. And then we move into embracing this more authentic wholeness that we are, and ultimately into gratitude in this incredibly new way of being. That the way I'll say it, because I've had people say to me, I had a client say to me last week, actually, how do you even know that you couldn't drink or use successfully after all these years? And my answer is, why would I want to? I have this magnificent life where I feel so whole and complete now. I feel like I'm living on purpose. Why would I want to medicate that?
Yes. I mean, that's how I feel too. Frankly, it never enters my mind. And it really only was reading your book and thinking about it that made me question why it is that this is not something I've ever been drawn to. And you're right. I mean, can you see that TJ and I, everyone, can you see that we've come at this from different directions totally, but ended in the same place? As you grow spiritually, all the things of this world become not important to you, and your eternal life is what becomes important, not consciously, but kind of in the core of your being, and you'll rise above addictions and the other problems, money problems, all those problems. You'll rise above them. And that's what's exciting about what you're doing. You know, I have a sense your book would help a lot of kinds of people who feel broken or damaged or not worthy. Have you looked at it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a pandemic, if you will, of shame in our culture. We get taught that. And I love the work that you're doing, because there's a lot of religious institutions that have talked about original sin, which that is basically teaching you're broken, right?
That's right.
And I know that's
right.
not what Jesus came here to teach, for sure.
No, there is really nothing about the way Christianity is now practiced that has anything to do with Jesus. I found that hard to say for a long time, but it's time to stand up for the Lord. I think he deserves to have people take him seriously now, and they never have. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the core evil teaching of Christianity is that you are broken, and you're not. You come into this world perfect, and then you sort of get broken by the culture around you, and you go back toward wholeness. You won't do that if you're worried about original sin, and if you don't go to church, what you'll go to hell? All that garbage is garbage.
Yes,
but that's the beautiful thing about what you're teaching, because you're teaching people you can feel free to love yourself. You're inherently already perfect. That is beautiful. That is beautiful, TJ. So I'm sure that if other people, maybe you've never felt that you were addicted to something or you needed, but if you feel that there's something not right about you, this book might help you quite a bit, because he walks you through the process of repairing a bad childhood or whatever has gone wrong in your life that makes you feel less than perfect. It's really a wonderful book for that. I mean, I would say yay as I read it. So, I recommend it even for that. So, TJ, do you have a website, or how can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. tjwoodward.com. And I wanted to say a few different opportunities about the way people can engage with conscious recovery. You can, of course, get the book and the workbook, work through it on your own. There's also, we're going to be working on some virtual online classes. They're going to be coming up where you can take a deeper dive into the material. And also I do coaching with people that I take them through this process in 3 or 6 month segments where we actually together customize and work through, we have a weekly session, and then I give people growth work where they can really take a deeper dive into this. So there's a lot of different ways to engage in the material. You can go to consciousrecovery.com for more information about that. We also have 2 retreats a year in Mill Valley. One of them's coming up again in October. So we look forward to that as well.
So, but if people don't live in Northern California or wherever San Francisco is, I guess it's maybe Middle California. If people don't live there, do you do long distance training or assistance?
Yes, absolutely. I do coaching with people all over the world. Actually, we can do weekly FaceTime or Skype sessions, and then also we're going to be launching. I hope I'm affirming by the end of the year we're going to have some different online programs that people can access from anywhere and go through these online e-courses that will help them walk through in a much deeper way the material that's outlined in the book, Conscious Recovery. Wow,
that's great. Well, this has been TJ Woodward. He has been our guest. Remember the name. You're going to hear it more of it, I think. TJ Woodward knows what he speaks about because he went through it himself, and in helping other people. Did you ever finish becoming a minister, incidentally, or did you drop that as you did this?
Well, it's very interesting. I through discernment, I left Unity. I went through 5 years of schooling with Unity, and I realized that as much as I love Unity wasn't my path. I started an independent New Thought Center that I had for 6 years, became ordained there, and then just a few weeks ago, I was ordained by Michael Bernard Beckwith at Agape International Spiritual Center, and so honored now that our spiritual community in Oakland is the very first Agape satellite. So I actually have 2 ordinations now. The one that I feel so grateful for is the one with Agape and Michael Bernard Beckwith.
I should say I have gone out to California. I've participated in this was several years ago in a session with one of your groups of people, and I have to say everybody there was so peaceful and loving and gentle and kind. So whatever you do for people, it's powerful because it permeated that whole group. And I'm glad to see now you're going to start, spreading it all over the world. TJ Woodward, as I say, is a dear friend of mine, but at the same time, he's also so much more. And I really think that the work he's doing is going to spread because it helps people so much. Thank you so much for being here, TJ. So all they have to do is go to consciousrecovery.com and they can visit with you.
Absolutely, or tjwoodward.com. And thank you, Roberta, for all the wonderful work you're doing in the world. I'm so grateful for our connection.
So am I. Well, everyone, as you know, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes, and I'm really glad you could be with us today. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You in particular, you never began and you never will end. And when you really understand that, your whole life will be transformed. Next week, our guest is going to be Kelvin Chin for the second time. He was last year here a year and a half ago to talk about his book, Overcoming the Fear of Death, which, frankly, is I didn't think it was possible for him to make people peaceful about a death that was going to end everything. But if that's your problem and you're having trouble really believing that there is an afterlife, try Kelvin's book because it really does ease people's hearts. And we're going to be talking next week about another area where I know nothing, just as I knew nothing about addiction. Kelvin is an expert on meditation. And I have never been able to meditate. My husband's been doing it daily for 40 years, but I swear I can't do it. But Kelvin says that the techniques he's developed will make me a happy meditator. That remains to be seen. But if you want to know more about meditation, please join us next week. You're going to enjoy Kelvin too. This week we've been speaking with my dear friend TJ Woodward. He is a gifted seeker and he understands amazingly well how to use the power of consciousness to help people and to help people heal their own lives. I loved Conscious Being, Awakening to Your True Nature. I urge it on everyone. And his recent book, Conscious Recovery, A Fresh Perspective on Addiction, is I think just it's not as precise about how to develop spiritually, but it's very precise about how to heal what about you is broken. So I just recommend that you be in his orbit if you feel that you need that kind of help, because you can read his book, but also just getting to know him is a wonderful experience. Now, as you know, my own nonfiction books are Liberating Jesus, all the fun books, My Thomas, and soon to be a second children's book as well.